For those of you who have seen my channel, you may already be aware that one of my most beloved deck strategies is what is known as Gren Maju OTK. I want to preface this video by saying that because I want to open up a discussion about what it takes for a card to be banned as a whole, I'm just using Gren Maju as a catalyst to further a much larger discussion on what it takes for a card to be banned as a whole. I'm JC Theater Yu-Gi-Oh! And today we're going to dive into a discussion on what makes a card ban-worthy: reverse power creep. I first want to take a moment to go over what reverse power creep is. In the game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, over time, cards are released that fully outclass and are able to outplay cards that were released prior to their introduction. This power creep is a natural progression of the card game, for if Konami never made products stronger than what was already out, there would be no point in buying new Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. Reverse power creep comes into play when certain newly introduced game mechanics, archetype gimmicks, or even just specific cards are released that interact with older cards in ways that were never considered and therefore cause these older cards to appear broken. The biggest reason reverse power creep sometimes leads to a card being banned is simply because when the card was created, it wasn't given enough restrictions to mitigate all of the potential advantage the card can get for you. For at the time when the card was created, there was no need to stop something that often wasn't too advantageous to begin with. Let us first bring our attention to a card such as Scapegoat. The restriction to not have the tokens be used for a tribute summon was actually relatively balancing in the game back when the card was first released. Used almost exclusively as a defensive card, over time as more cards came out which benefited from tributing monsters for their effects, Scapegoat became better and better. This all came to a peak once the advent of link summoning emerged, which brought about a whole new level of usefulness for Scapegoat. This once measly defensive strategy was soon used to create incredibly powerful monsters. No longer was the restriction of not being able to tribute them nor normal summon the same turn you activated equal to the insane advantage this one card would get you. And so, Konami had to limit it. Some other cards that the advent of link summoning directly affected through means of reverse power creep are Level Eater, Dandelion, Number 42 Galaxy Tomahawk, and other monsters that net you more than one body on board in a relatively free manner. Token generation, once thought of as a useful gimmick, had become so powerful even cards like Blackwing Gofu the Vague Shadow have been banned due to their utility growing exponentially since this new game mechanic had been added. Though I am focusing mainly on the advent of link summoning as my example of game mechanics causing reverse power creep, it should be known that all mechanics in one form or another have caused something similar, albeit often a lot less widespread. Take pendulums for instance, and how their function during gameplay made anti-spell fragrance an even more powerful and impactful floodgate than it was before. Speaking on the topic of floodgates, when talking of reverse power creep, one must also mention cards who have gotten better purely due to how gameplay as a whole has evolved in general. From what was once a normal summon focused, one-for-one card advantage game of beatdown strategies and high attack monsters, Yu-Gi-Oh! Evolved, due to power creep, to focus on special summoning monsters with all sorts of powerful effects. Vanity's Emptiness is a floodgate that did not see much play during its initial release in Cyberdark Impact, but over time, as special summoning became more and more important, it started seeing so much play that it eventually was banned. And this card was not banned simply because reverse power creep made it become a commonly played card, but rather it stopped decks from doing what at the time they had to do to function, which was to special summon. This interesting interaction of causing a player to abandon modern Yu-Gi-Oh! While at the same time allowing the user of the card to continue playing unhindered is an interesting dynamic that often leads to Konami not wanting it to stay in the game. The form of reverse power creep that Gren Maju embodies is based on both Konami's card design as well as players' actual card choices when constructing decks. When it comes to card choices, in 2019 Yu-Gi-Oh!, players focus on using combo pieces or floodgates. The game of Yu-Gi-Oh!, as critics would argue, is all about establishing as large of a board as possible while at the same time preventing your opponent from doing it as well. Decks now usually consist of cards from one's chosen archetype, any sort of engines to help facilitate plays within that archetype, combo extenders and floodgates, side deck cards or cards played specifically to counter what duelists believe they will see the most of, and some sort of small staple package like a generic draw card, Monster Reborn, etc. Though this is a severely watered down example, my point with it is that in 2019, no one in the competitive scene plays battle traps. Gren Maju manages to take its strategy back to the olden days, and though all of the cards in the deck to support him still follow the formulaic route of using monster and spell effects to disrupt and destroy your opponent, the win condition of the deck is ultimately to attack with a single monster and reduce your opponent's life points to 0. Though it has come up as a spicy tech here and there, for the most part, the general population of competitive duelists are not running Mirror Force or any of its variants. This is a similar thinking behind how Altergeist can sometimes steal tops. When no top decks are using a lot of threatening traps, no one plays or expects to play much back row removal. That allows Altergeist to come in for the kill and steal games. But then, people know Altergeist is a threat, so in turn, it may compel them to run a few back row removal cards, since it can counter Altergeist and also be used against other strategies. The same case can be made with battle traps in Gren Maju, but with the usual deck list's ability to have enough room to tech in back row removal with cards such as Hey Trunade and Danger Thunderbird, they can mitigate the potential biggest weakness that stops them if players even decide to play cards that counter the deck in the first place. The second and biggest contributor to the reverse power creep of Gren Maju and the deck he is played in, and the reason why I believe it to actually lead to a problem sometime into the future of the game, is the fact that Konami has recently been printing more cards using the face-down Banished mechanic. Potentially due to the nature of it being difficult to recur a card from the Banished zone, and it being even more difficult to recur a face-down Banished card, Konami has used this mechanic as a way to permanently remove cards from the game as much as they possibly can. The ultimate sacrifice or punishment, this drawback is what makes cards like Pot of Desires and Evenly Matched so balanced. One makes you pay the face-down Banish cost, while the other makes you basically skip your main phase 1 to most effectively give your opponent that detriment. So what is the point of all of this discussion on reverse power creep in terms of Gren Maju? In layman's terms, it boils down to this. Konami has been using face-down banishing as the most permanent form of removal. It's used as both the cost for the strongest of effects and also the effects of cards with steep costs. As they continue to create more cards using this mechanic, the simple fact is, Gren Maju just gets that much better. Gren Maju is one of the few cards that purely benefits from the face-down banish mechanic, for he doesn't care if your cards are face-down or face-up, only that they are banished, period. Will we ever see a time where one day other cards with powerful effects that are mitigated by banishing resources, such as more Pot of Desires-like effects, become more and more prevalent, resulting in a deck consisting of just a bunch of those cards in Gren Maju? Though this is an unfounded claim, it's still interesting to think that we could potentially live in a world where Gren Maju de Aiza, the once super gimmicky one-trick pony, inconsistent, stunny deck, becomes something so powerful and such a thorn in the side of a game mechanic that it may one day see itself where all the greats go to die. Thank you so much, guys. This video was kind of unorganized and had a lot of a lot going on, but this is my first actual kind of discussion that I hope I was able to get my point across without it being too contrived or dumb sounding. Anyways, I'm JC Theater Yu-Gi-Oh! And if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing. I appreciate you guys. See ya!